I'm Ken Bresky, and this is another episode of Lunch and Learn here at MC Tool and Safety. Today we're going to cover kind of a confusing part of the business, or it can be confusing, but I'll try to break it down into as simple a proposition as I can. Diamond cutting and grinding tools. So here at MC Tool and Safety, we sell primarily a product line called Ditech. They're a high quality manufacturer doing a variety of products that serve our customers and our market very, very well. So when our customers come to us and they need to cut concrete, the most efficient way to do it is with diamond impregnated products. So you take a circular saw blade, and instead of teeth on it, you put little bits of diamond that allows it to cut concrete or grind concrete. So there's two basic kinds of products that they use for that. The first, and maybe the most popular, is a segmented blade, and it is just what it says. Each segment contains a cutting edge here that's got diamonds impregnated into the last 3/8 of an inch of the blade or so, and as the blade wears down, it exposes new diamonds that keep the blade cutting as opposed to glazing over and dulling. And the secret to that whole thing over the years is what recipe they use. So they want the diamond chips to stay in there as long as possible, as long as they're cutting, but as soon as they quit cutting, they want them to fall out. So you have a recipe that contains the diamond and the rest of that segment. So it's kind of a balancing act, and it can take years to figure it out. This kind of product's been in existence for as long as I've been in the business, so they're finally getting it down to a pretty good science. So that's a segmented blade, and that space between those segments allows the slurry and the dust and the material that gets removed to be jettisoned or sent away. The other way to cut concrete or stone is with a continuous rim kind of blade, and that's just what it says. There's less segments or no segments at all. This one's kind of got slots on the outside to accomplish that cleaning out process, but some other manufacturers that would just be like little bits of diamond coating that whole thing. Those kinds of blades are typically used for really harder kinds of material, glazed tile or porcelain sometimes, but they'll work on concrete block or anything else too. Generally, if you're just trying to cut fast, you'd want to use a segmented blade, and if you want to take your time and do a little more intricate kind of work, you'd use the continuous rim. So these blades are used in grinders, little 4.5 inch, 4.5 to 5 inch angle grinders. They also are made in 6 inch and 7 inch. So there's a variety of tools that are used for that, whether it's DeWalt or Black & Decker or Milwaukee, they all make them. The blades are interchangeable, the guards are not. So as with all things with power tools, we should never forget our safety products. So before we start doing any kind of work, particularly in concrete, we have to protect the workers from dust. New regulations now indicate that you can't create any dust. In the biggest of pictures, that's the rule, but in reality, it's kind of a time average thing. Over 8 hours, you can't expose workers, and it varies on the kind of work they're doing and the kind of products they're using. So to collect the dust, we've got a couple of different ways to do that. If you're using one of these cutting blades, you would use a cutting guard like this, hook up your HEPA vac to it and extract the dust as you're creating it. If you're grinding concrete, you'd be using a cup wheel like this, and they come in different configurations as well, depending what the application is and the user's experience. They can say that, oh, I never use anything except a T-segment blade, which is this one. Other guys will say, those don't work. kinds of products that I use, I'd rather have a double edge because they last longer. Somebody else wants an angled edge, so it's kind of like Ford, Chevy, Lexus, whatever. It's a personal preference and what your experience dictates for the application. So those products are used to even out floors. We've all seen spots, even in this floor, that aren't even, so you kind of use a grinder like this to level that off and eliminate hazards. Or if you've got ceramic tile on the floor and you've ripped it out of there and you've got all this leftover grout, you want to use a product like this to smooth it out so you can apply the new grout and get a better finish and a more consistent surface. Diamond isn't the best thing to use on certain adhesives, so there's another product that we stock that is used for kind of softer mastics. Tore out an old floor, sometimes that stuff can be kind of goopy and would bog down or gum up a diamond wheel. So this is a PCD wheel, which is just big chunks of carbide. They're not diamond, they're carbide steel. But there are very few of them on that wheel, so it's not going to gum up because the segments are so far apart there's no place for it to stick. Doing floor preparation work, we'll use a lot of those. And when you're trying to eliminate dust with a cup grinder, you'd use an accessory like this. So instead of the cut guard, you'd use a grinding guard. Same situation. As you're creating the dust, it gets sucked out through this hose connection here. And then part of this shroud actually pulls off, so you could come right up to a wall to get as close to the wall as possible. So the last inch of that blade guard would come off and allow you to do that. So that's kind of grinding and cutting for smaller tools. These products are all available in larger sizes, 7-inch for the 7-inch grinders, 8-inch. You don't see a 9-inch too often. I think it's just too unwieldy and it's not practical for handheld use. You will see some floor operated machines like a buffing machine that have bigger wheels occasionally, but that's not too typical for the average customer of ours. Next up, we'll talk about slightly larger tools. We talked about the 7-inch grinder as opposed to the 4.5, and that's what we have here. It can be a beast to hang on to, so anybody using that all day long will be in pretty good shape. Blades can also be used, diamond blades can also be used in circular size. This happens to be a 6.5-inch, so they don't make a 6.5-inch diamond blade, but a 6-inch would fit in there. You just end up sacrificing some cutting depth. But the same cautions prevail. You want to try and collect dust from this, and there are other accessories made that would fit on this saw to allow you to do that, or you can eliminate dust by adding water as well. As long as you're using a cordless tool, that's okay. But if you're adding water to a 120 volt tool, you have to take extra precautions and use ground fault interrupters and not get electrocuted. So when you want to get deeper cuts in concrete, or cut thicker materials like block or bricks, then you want to get into a 10, 12, 14-inch blade, and you need a bigger tool to operate that. We don't really sell the kind of equipment on a regular basis that these are used in. We do have this old beast in our rental fleet, which is this is probably only a 12-inch, but could be a 14-inch electric cutoff machine. all of us have probably seen workers on the highways using handheld, instead of a chainsaw-like motor, it's got this circular blade on it, and they'll use those to cut curbs, they'll use them to cut driveways, they'll use them to cut sidewalks. So those are the kinds of equipment that these larger 12 and 14 inch and even 16 inch blades get used on. Typical application there is the sidewalk or a driveway or a road. So those materials rely on the proper segment to cut them efficiently. In the old days, meaning as long as 20 years ago, you'd have to have one blade for concrete, one blade for asphalt, another blade for brick, another blade for block, because they didn't have that recipe down yet to make them apply to everything. More recently though, they have, this one here happens to be a straight concrete blade. So you could use it on concrete block, you could use it on poured concrete. Then a few years, well, probably 15 years ago, Dytek introduced this Guardian blade, and they were one of the first to have kind of an all-purpose blade, so it can be used with all those materials I described and do a pretty good job on all of it. In the past, you could use an asphalt blade on concrete and vice versa, but the performance wouldn't be as good across the board. But with this blade, you do get pretty much equal performance all the way across the board. We also stock and sell those blades as big as 24 inch. So that's a pretty good problem solver for customers who don't know what they're getting into, or if they have a multiple layer. Sometimes they got concrete on the bottom and asphalt on top. That Guardian's a perfect blade for that. One of the pitfalls is operator error. One of the most common errors, I guess, is that they'll glaze over the diamonds. And that can happen, in the old days it would happen when you used a concrete blade on asphalt. It'd get all gummy and then it would glaze over and it wouldn't cut. To solve that problem, you take a blade that we sell, an abrasive blade. So it's made up of stone, little chunks of stone and grit that are used for either cutting concrete or steel. And you just cut through one of those blades with the diamond blade and you take that glaze off. Or you take a grinder like this with a grinding wheel in it for metal, and you just rough up the cutting edge of that blade and expose more diamonds, and then go back to work on what that diamond blade was meant to be cut. Then it'll usually start working again. Doesn't always work, but it is a first thing to try. The other error that they make is that they want to force it. So they'll lean on it, on the saw or the tool too much, and build up heat. They don't allow the slurry or the dust to escape the cut, and then so much heat builds up that same glazing effect takes place. And then the third thing that happens is that they jam it into the work and segments fly off. Then the blade is going where it hits that missing segment, and the amount of work that you can get done with these is significantly more than it was 20 years ago. They've had a lot more people jump into the business, so competition is good in that regard for the end user or the contractor. Sometimes not so good for us who are selling it, because there's options, many more options than there used to be. But that kind of covers the diamond aspect. So there you have it. Another episode has concluded.